Yo, y'all got me giving away too much free game. Look, I seen a cool little article about, well, not an article, but a post where a person was talking about breeding themselves. We're breeding ourselves into a corner. I agree in certain kind of ways, and in certain ways I don't. But this is it. If you breed a certain blood, like I breed a certain blood, I breed my blood. The thing of it is that y'all have heard me say that the community needs certain things, right? Someone texted me, so it threw me off. But the community needs certain things, right? And in this community, we need balance. And in this community, we need education. So I'm here to give you balance and education. But many of you have heard me talk about the 66% rule, as I call it. That's my rule, okay? Now, the reason why I say this is that I have personally seen this, and I've talked to some other people who actually have degrees, where it seems to be a breaking point with any blood. That where if you, like 66% of that blood seems to be the very highest that you can get without becoming totally distorted in your breedings. So put it this way, like, and y'all have heard me explain this before, but I'll explain it again. Dad to daughter breedings. That's 75% of the blood. A lot of times that inbreeding type of thing causes issues. Now we go grandfather to granddaughter. Grandfather to granddaughter breaks down to very, very close to that, where the puppies will be right there at the 2/3 of the blood. You know what I mean? She's got 25% of his blood. You know what I'm saying? So when they breed together, you'd be looking at what, 62.5% of the blood in those puppies would be his. You know what I mean? The stud. That's why you can do the grandfather to granddaughter, and it seems to work out a lot better than the father to the daughter. You always seem to, not every single time, but a lot of times you get to see weird shit. You know what I mean? So, excuse me, with that being said, you want to stay in that range. Now, also what you have to take into account is when you look back on your pedigree, you start to see, for instance, one of the more popular dogs, Cairo. If you go back further enough and you see that you got a whole line of Cairo, you're doing an inbreeding. Although you don't feel like you're doing an inbreeding, if that dog that is 3 or 4 generations in the pedigree is there very, very, very heavily, then it's pretty much the same thing as you breeding father to daughter, because the genetics are a high percentage of that particular dog. So don't just look up front. You've got to go in the back also. This is where they, you know, you hear the term outcross a lot. The only problem in the American bully world is that oftentimes we'll say it's an outcross and we're basing that off of the 3rd generation. You know, like, okay, go back to the granddaddy and the great granddaddy blood, named the same. Make sure that you go back about 3 more generations and make sure that the granddaddy and the great granddaddy are not put together the exact same way as the other granddaddy and great granddaddy on the opposite side, because they could be, you know what I mean, they could be from the same family of dogs, you know, further back on the genetics. And so then it becomes an inbreeding up front. Generally, and this is why I talk to y'all, we will talk about this more, but generally when I'm studying a pedigree, I really, really like to go back 8 generations if I can. But a lot of times it's hard to find the 8 generations. So 6 generations, I get an even better picture. At the very least, you should be at 4 generations and you'll be a little safer. But I like to dig as far as I can to make sure that the blood is being broken up and I'm not breeding over 2/3 of the same blood in any particular breeding, because you need genetics to watch this stuff grow. If you don't, you're going to end up with issues. You're going to end up with loss of size. You're going to end up with neurological problems and all the other things, a beat down immune system that causes the dog to get sick. This is one of the reasons why the blue dogs always have skin diseases, because most of the blue dogs, it became such a fad, like the Merles are now, that they inbred the hell out of the blue dogs and they all ended up with skin issues because they all pretty much derived from the same type of dogs. And it didn't help. You know, back in the day, everybody was blue kennels, blue line, blue this, blue that, and it was just blue, 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 and they bred those genetics so tightly after a while and kept compounding to try to get blue dogs that all the blue dogs had not just bad skin, but they had a lower level of immune system, period. It was well known that a lot of the blue dogs just couldn't fight off certain diseases as much. They had a higher probability of parvo and different things like that. And now we're seeing this throughout the breed, whether it's a white dog, whether it's this dog, whether it's that dog, because the gene pool was always so small. And then we talk about the gene pool of our original dogs, but now you're adding in other dogs who have these deficiencies too, and that's a whole different conversation. But now you're upping the probability of genetic issues, and I'll make a second video about that. Matter of fact, I'll make it right after this. If you haven't ever followed me on the live, I talked about that, but I'll talk about that now. But the thing about breeding yourself in the corner and how do you get away from it is, bottom line, study. You know, like in my yard, and I'm gonna give you guys this example. I understand where Excalibur blood comes from, which I have a good amount of Excalibur blood. I understand, you know, where a lot of these dogs come from, but I also have old straws that I'll be using to break up some of the blood and bounce it around and change the percentages, keep the percentages where they're at. But then I have like the ultimate outcrosses. And if you say, what would that be? I've mentioned that I have some old Camelot blood, real Camelot blood, not that watered down shit that they have now. So if I really want to, and if I feel like I'm totally backed into a corner, I can make a separate set of bitches that will definitely break my genetics down. Because nothing in my yard is so tight right now that it's over the 66. But if I ever start to see I'm in a position that I have to do that, we're already doing the breeding right now with one of our the Camelot bitch. We'll breed her, you know what I'm saying? And her females will just totally break down everything, because behind her genetics, it goes back to none of the edge stuff. So that gives us the opportunity to go ahead, and if we say we keep 2 or 3 females from there, if we breed our males to those 2 or 3 females, their blood is still so far away from the stuff that we have that we can maneuver with it responsibly, and it'll give us a bigger window as far as to not getting too tight. I have a couple other girls that when I look at their pedigrees, it's like that. As you look back, you're like, this is not that close to what I have. And it's great. You know, my girl Tafidi's blood is not super tight to what we have, so it allows for a good breakdown. And you always need that dog that's sort of totally opposite of your blood. And don't be afraid. Sometimes you have to go, now don't go exotic, but sometimes you have to go like all the way far away from your blood, and you have to plan on this being a 2 to 3 breeding process, to where I'm making a dog for a future breeding. I'm not making this dog to show right now. This is brood stock, you know. This is brood stock. So when you start talking about, you know, having your breeding bitches or having a stud there to break it up, that's simply what this dog's job is for. It might not even look as much, even after you do the breedings, the puppies might not look, they shouldn't look as much like your other stock if it's not a like characteristic breeding. And what I mean by like characteristic breeding is basically what it sounds like, that the dogs look so much alike that even though they're not closely related, the puppies will probably carry on that look. And that's probably the best way you want to do if you stay consistent. But sometimes you look for other features. But yes, it is an absolute must that, you know, don't just call it an outcross because it's not quote unquote, you know, such and such kennel's blood. Do your research and try to get something that you go back at least, like, say 6 generations and there's nothing really there in common too much. That'll totally break your stuff up, and it'll save you for another, if you do it right, another 5, 6 generations to where you're out of that corner. In this community, one of the biggest problems is that you had the stuff all start from 2 different, for the most part, 2 different bloods, which was Edge and which was Gotti, and you had a lot of Juan Gotti, you had a lot of Cairo. I told y'all the stories about that, and it has gotten tight, but don't overthink it, because honestly, if you do it right, you shouldn't run into breeding yourself into a corner if you just put a little effort into it and don't call it line breeding just because you're breeding to the cousins. You find the proper studs that go away from your blood, then you come back. That's all. That's as simple as it is. At the end of all of this talk I've given you, go away from your blood, come back. You can come back for 2, 3 more generations. Go away from your blood, come back, 2, 3 more generations. You're good. But if you continue to you know, compound that and do those close breedings, brother to half brother to half sister all the time, the genes get tighter and tighter. You know what I mean? They get tighter and tighter. You do the half brother to half sister, then you turn around and you do, you know what I'm saying, the father of that to the grandkids. The genes are getting tighter. Even though it got a little looser, you're not going anywhere. It's going to get tighter. So you always have to balance that and find ways to maneuver around it and bring in other dogs who are not as tight. But great way to you know, to keep your dogs healthy, and it affects the structure a lot. But I'll get into that on the next video. Much love. Peace.